Session 32. Good evening. First, naturally, I have a few comments to make that will not only tie in Rupert's smoking habits with his present personality, but also to some extent tie in his present personality with past personalities. His discipline is improving and has improved this life, especially since the ending of the adolescent period. His smoking, dear Joseph, is indulged in for entirely different reasons than those reasons which impelled you to smoke, and the habit is difficult for him to break. Though he is breaking it, and he has made strides that are important during the past year. His smoking represents the tail end of a characteristic greediness that besieged him in past lives, with smoking this time as a remnant. The greediness in the past involved many more areas. It included a strong appetite toward stuffing himself with food and drink, and an overall greediness of appetite, even of intellectual and emotional greediness, which he has largely overcome. This time, and particularly since adolescence ended, he was able to let go the other types of greediness, letting the cigarette take place of all the rest. There is here also what I may call a sort of air panic, an insatiable taking in of air that the nervous puffing of a cigarette sometimes satisfies, even a basis in claustrophobia, where the personality feels it is not getting enough air or is closed in. Rupert even has a latent, gluttonous desire for rich foods that he has conquered. Nevertheless, although the cigarette habit satisfies these basic old habits, he will be able to let it go. He is a gobbler, that is all, a gobbler of ideas, of emotions, of atmosphere, in some ways a veritable sponge soaking up whatever he can. But he has learned discipline, and he is learning a certain amount of patience, which is difficult for him. There is also here, connected only with his present personality, an ego image of the writer with a cigarette. In this case, the cigarette represents independence and even individuality, and even female emancipation. So it is all bound up together in a rather maze-like web. I hope that when Rupert understands this, it will take the situation easier for him. As I said, it also has to do with a panicky gobbling up of air, as if he could never get enough. As a child, at one time, he died from suffocation, and this also has its bearings here in the present, the panicky gulping of air being a mechanism of subconscious memory. I do hope that this helped him. I did not intend to go into this any more deeply tonight, but it is rather interesting, and he thought he had a foolproof method of gratification, a gratification that seemed to bring no penalties, as with overeating and so forth. The personality here has been giving as a rule, but also took in all it could. I hope that this also answers some questions that you might have had, Joseph, along these lines. Rob asked, "Did you make the trip to the store with Jane tonight?" She said, "No, I was aware that she made the trip. These sessions of trying to give up smoking are a definite help, and the habit will finally give way. The personality is becoming stronger and will be able to deal with the problem. As in the past, it conquered a gluttony toward food and other elements. The panic itself will not be as severe as Ruber faces it and realizes the connection with a gulping of air. I know about the book on auto-hypnosis and believe that this will be a big help to Ruber along these lines, as it will enable him to bypass many of the ego's objections. This habit of various reasons then is deeply rooted and seemed to be a harmless answer to a number of past and present needs and problems. It aggravates a certain amount of nervousness, however, and is not beneficial. In this also a definite but not bullying attitude is important. The panicky feeling is already lessening, and the Ruber's discipline is catching up with and conquering his emotional attitudes, so that the problem will be worked out. That is, he will stop smoking. Rab, was Jen ever a smoker in a previous life? He said, no, it is this tendency to gobble here that is important. He has given up in this life gobbling food and drink. In past lives, he has never tempered, neither in a physical sense, emotionally or intellectually. This was not in many ways bad. However, when the intemperate personality does not discriminate, then the basic characteristic can cause unpleasantness. He was always very generous, for example, and kind, even overly kind. On the other hand, he ate and drank too much. He was just overeager as a rule. His circumstances of birth made it difficult for him to overindulge in the rich things of life. Although his present mother used rich foods as compensation for other things, and this example opened Ruber's eyes and actually started him on the road to self-discipline. I will go into this in a few moments and suggest a brief break. This gluttony, and you may put that in quotes, actually represented a terrific capacity for all kinds of consumption, and the consumption of knowledge was no exception. An impatience was also important, and the capacity also showed itself in an ability for psychic knowledge and a thirst in all matters pertaining to intellect, emotions, and the physical. In the present personality, we have abilities developed in past lives, and the ability to paint, for example, that should be made more use of now. What you call Ruber's sales ability is also a result of past experiences, and certain other latent abilities, such as a facility with growing plants. He was at one time an excellent farmer. There has been here a willingness to experience, to experiment, and to give, as well as a ferocious capacity to take in. The trouble in the past has been a lack of discretion and self-discipline. He was always a pleasure-loving personality, however, and avoided anything unpleasant. His early circumstances in this life were chosen by him as a needed experience. In other lives, he was able to exist without too much adversity, and this time he chose troublesome and truly tragic circumstances as a needed challenge. His temper when aroused was very great, however, and he retaliated instantly. He had never known hatred, however. This time, he has had to deal with it in a more intimate manner. The old storming temper is now seen in Rupert's deep grudges. The personality of Rupert's mother was not close to him in any other life. The circumstances of birth were chosen at that minute on his part and was made for two reasons. 1. The personality of the mother offered needed experience for Rupert, and 2. The paganistic personality of the father was in some degree like his own pet personalities, though in a much more vague and watered-down way. A miscarriage later on the part of Rupert's mother represented an entity who changed his mind, so to speak. He was at one time a brother. Rupert's present shape is something he has been working for. He was often tall, hardy, and stout. Rob asked, why did Jane have her miscarriage? They said Rupert's miscarriage was a result of something else entirely. This time you are both on your last reincarnation cycle on your plane, and as a rule, no personality fragments are left behind. Rob asked what would happen if we did have a child. They said this happens fairly often. It does not change the fact that it is the last reincarnation cycle for parents, for example, although it may be lonely for the child in such an instance. I have not gone into these questions. However, to some degree in the subconscious mind, you have what could be called a ghost image of your ancestors, and when your parents are in their last reincarnation cycle, they leave your plane, and it is more difficult for the ghost image to be imprinted. What you would call the wisdom of instinct is not then so sure. There have been, however, a few periods in mankind's history when this happened en masse. It just worked out that way that a large majority of personalities finished their cycles more or less at one time. Rob asked, what was the last time this happened? They said the Middle Ages represented such a break, and I also suggest a break. Rob asked, in what century did this period begin? They said, I will go into this more deeply after your break. When the Middle Ages began, a large number of personalities who had lived before and during the Roman period were ready to end their reincarnation cycles. They were the most efficient learners, the wisest and the most able personalities, and they withdraw their subconscious knowledge and memories from your plane. This was one of the reasons for the decay of knowledge and learning in the Middle Ages. There were personalities reincarnated during the Middle Ages who had lived during the Roman experience. However, they were not leading personalities, and they were not able to transmit knowledge or abilities from past lives, simply because they had not the inherent strength or capacity needed. There were other personalities, of course, who were fairly developed, but these were resting. The world, so to speak, got back on his feet when these personalities reappeared centuries later, and by this time, new personalities who had taken the place of those whose cycles were completed also began to use and show their abilities. Rob asked, in what century did the withdrawal take place? They said, by the end of the 10th century, the first group of personalities completed their cycle. It took a period of time from then until the late 1600s for any valid readjustment to take place, and by the middle 16th century you began to get bursts of beneficial activities, and new flashes of knowledge. The monks who copied old manuscripts and preserved some remnants of knowledge did so because of their own past personal connection and experience with the knowledge itself. Rab'at were the French and American revolutions related to such a burst? They said the revolutions, both of them, were so connected. Representing an offshoot from the freedoms initiated in Athens and greatly expanded. Great Britain was in many respects a special place in that many of those personalities who had been resting were born there at fairly regular intervals. And you had a more consistent belief in liberty that did not necessitate such bloody and unfortunate revolutions as those that occurred elsewhere. Rab'at, what's the case in Russia today? They said, today? Rab'at, well, in this century then. They said, it is in many ways the fault of personalities themselves as to which lands are developed or underdeveloped in various ways. Many personalities prefer rebirth in pleasant, temperate, or warm climates. Often they congregate for such selfish reasons in pleasant climates and in countries where political situations are not dangerous. This has been the case with the country of Russia in the past, but it may not be the case in the future. As activity grows there, intellectual and psychic attractions will draw stronger and wiser personalities. The same in a somewhat different manner will apply to countries in Africa. There are whole areas of material here that we have not discussed, so that this is spotty, but we will go into it more deeply. There are no laws to force personalities to use all their abilities. A personality will not choose unfavorable circumstances of rebirth until he himself sees that necessary discipline can be achieved in no other manner. Therefore, extremely hot and extremely cold countries go largely undeveloped. But once development begins to occur, it is swift. The problems that a country must work out merely represent the problems set by the personality inhabitants for themselves, and the country is merely the framework of such activities. There is a close bond between reincarnational cycles and the earthly historical periods that we will discuss later. Sometimes, though not always, personalities who need a certain experience will be born into a particular country or race. I have been somewhat avoiding this whole issue since delicate balance are interconnected, and the question of the Jews is one that must bother all men. I suggest a brief break. The same personalities are not always reborn, for example, in the same race. It is true that your history shows a continuity of Jewish persecutions, that is, persecutions of Jews. The fact is that many personalities who have been famous in many eras have also been proud, brilliant, and cruel, and have belittled and persecuted those they considered beneath them. These personalities, often talented in many directions and often with past experiences of wealth and power, choose to be born as Jews of their own volition, and this is a comic compensation, not in any sense punishment, but a needed adjustment on the part of the personalities involved. The horrible misdeeds committed upon the Jews by the Germans were certainly not asked for specifically. However, large numbers of those Jews were Huns of a very cruel variety in a past existence. The Germans of that particular generation were not revenging past misdeeds. Revenge has no place in this discussion. In one sense, there is no excuse for what occurred. The Jewish people have always displayed great financial abilities, these being natural remnants of knowledge of wealth. As in previous lives, many of them had positions of power which they misused. Your generation as a whole had to learn the importance of thought and responsibility. You had to learn that basically to hate is to kill. The lesson was a practical one. The Germans and the Jews made it plain. Had the hatred not existed in the Germans, it could not have been channeled as it was against the Jews. Free will operated there as always. Rabbi, have we learned our lesson? They said, you are beginning to learn the lesson. Rupert's vehement anger over something that seems perhaps much more trivial. The death by shooting of the starlings is a case in point. Killing except for self-protection will be paid for. The idea of killing is what is at fault. If you agree with the killing of birds, for example, you wind up with the killing of men. You will all be taught the sacredness of all life, and in the most practical way. Rabbi, how about our killing animals for food? On your plan, the hunter and the prey system is at this time a necessary one, but it will not always be this way. A time will come when you will not have to kill in order to exist, and the balance of nature will take care of itself. This time is sooner on the way than you think. In your country, if there is peace, you will see its beginning in your lifetimes. Rabbi, does this include doing away with slaughterhouses? They said, it most certainly does. This involves your own intellectual technology, which will be quite able to maintain its population with synthetic proteins. However, this technological development will come first. Unfortunately, the corresponding ethical evolution will follow after. There is a very practical reason for a reverence for all life, and very practical reasons why man must learn certain facts that up to this point he has considered impractical. He has usually managed to separate his ethical conceptions from his daily business life, but this shall be increasingly difficult for him to manage. Until you learn reverence for all living things, you will continue to slaughter each other. Again, this does not involve punishment in any sense of the word. But the idea of killing permissiveness is not discriminating. Once you allow yourself to kill, you will kill any living thing. In future lives, this involves the race in further adjustments. I suggest a break, and incidentally, Joseph, you have done well this week. I would suggest, Robert, that you do not smoke tomorrow. Keep the pack you already have for periods of panic. Also, use a hot cloth on your face when your sinuses bother you, and do not use the jabs as they aggravate your condition. As your sinuses begin to clear up, you will not experience the nervous ability to gulp air or to smoke, at least to such a degree. You want to take smoke and air into your lungs. You want to feel them, because at one time you could not, and the sinus trouble is directly related to this nervous gulping of air. A more relaxed attitude will reduce the quick breathing and the tightening of the sinuses that results from not relaxing. This should be of benefit. Also, the slow breathing habits you begin to acquire with your yoga exercise will be beneficial. Giving up the smoking habit will also help you in this respect. You are strongly intuitive and very quick, but you can learn to have a more relaxed body. A fear has been developed by the present personality resulting directly from early circumstances. Robert is afraid that if he does not operate quickly, he will be symbolically caught and crippled, as is the case with his present mother. The disability of the present mother is a result of that personality's own problems, and Robert does not have to fear such a circumstance in his own condition. However, a relaxed attitude is extremely important to counteract other tendencies. His fear of relaxation is actually rather simple, based and superficial, in that it does not have its source in a past life, but in this one. The fear is the result of the mother's mockery of the father, and I believe this will make sense to Robert even consciously. The two of you are well equipped to help each other, which should make things easier. And Joseph, we will go into the inner senses shortly. I have given you some other general material somewhat in outline form as preparation for future sessions. And you have done well this week, working out some challenges concerning your paintings. All sessions will of course vary in many respects, and this is to be expected. I did incidentally watch Robert write one of his points about the startlings, and though poetry was never one of my lines, I have to admit that I was quite impressed. Rob asked which point was it? They said it was the point that Robert sent to the paper. Incidentally, Robert always felt a stronger bond with every living thing, and even as a man was not cruel. He was only a Christian once, the last time, and otherwise was paganistic, but always in ways that enabled him to feel close to the earth. This is, of course, one of the main reasons for his particular reaction with the Stalin incident, and this quality has been a saving one in the past. I suggest another short break, and I will resume for only a few moments after. Yes, I do know it is raining and that your spring is on its way. A reverence for life is a saving characteristic of any personality who has it. It adds of itself important elements of understanding and growth in a direct manner. Reverence for life will also enable you to understand and deal with other human beings in a more kindly and beneficial manner. It will enable you to act and to help without blaming them for shortcomings, since these shortcomings may actually have been chosen by them for reasons of compensation. I do not want this session to run too long. However, the reverence for life is so important that I wanted to underline it, and also to emphasize that it includes all life and man himself. Later, I will go into the creation of other plants, and remember also that as man creates his own camouflage pattern, he also works out his problems on the stage of history, which is also his creation. This is a point worth remembering. This session has been very peaceful and pleasant, and I repeat, some night we will have our party. Now that you have a recorder, you can use it when we have our happy session, and it will free you from taking notes. I haven't had the opportunity to use my sense of humor lately, but it is still here, as you will discover. This is one of those nights when I dislike saying goodbye for now, but I will And Rupert, please heed my advice, all of it. Good night, my chicks. Ralph said, Good night, Sis.